The Igra Empire arrived without warning, their massive ships casting dark shadows across Earth's cities. The world had never seen anything like it, a perfectly synchronized invasion, coordinated with an efficiency that left little time for organized resistance. When the first wave of Igra clones descended, humanity had already lost half its cities. These weren't soldiers in the traditional sense. They were biologically engineered, genetically identical warriors. Fearless, tireless, and unwavering, they carried out their orders with brutal precision. Governments scrambled to respond. Tanks, jets, and infantry deployed in a desperate attempt to push back the invading forces. It was a futile effort. The Igra clones were relentless, replicating faster than human armies could kill them. Each fallen soldier was instantly replaced by another, identical in every way, no scars, no fatigue, no hesitation. Earth's armies were overwhelmed, caught in a war of attrition they couldn't hope to win. As major cities fell, world leaders turned to unconventional methods. In secret, military strategists from across the globe formed a plan. They knew brute force was no match for the Igra, so they needed to fight with intelligence. The answer wasn't in sending more soldiers, it was in sending the right ones. Thus, Project Ghost Arrow was born. Handpicked from the most elite special forces, 6 snipers were selected for a mission that could determine the fate of humanity. These snipers weren't ordinary soldiers. They had trained their entire lives for moments like this, masters of stealth, precision, and survival. They understood the art of patience, the importance of a single shot. If anyone could dismantle the Igra's carefully controlled invasion, it was them. Captain Maya Dalton, known as Eagle Eye, led the team. A veteran of countless operations, Dalton had earned a reputation for making impossible shots over extreme distances. Calm under pressure, she was the perfect leader for such a high-stakes mission. With her were 5 others, each a legend in their own right: Sergeant Nikolai Volkov, Phantom, a master of camouflage and infiltration; Lieutenant Javier Reyes, Hawk, a quick-thinking marksman who excelled in mobile operations; and 3 others, each bringing unique skills to the table. Their objective was clear but dangerous: eliminate key Igra commanders and sabotage the alien cloning systems. If the Igra could no longer replicate their forces at the same rate, Earth's military might stand a chance of pushing them back. But the risks were high. Behind enemy lines, the snipers would be outnumbered, outgunned, and cut off from support. They would have to rely on their wits, skill, and each other to survive. As the team deployed in secret, the world remained unaware of the bold plan. To the public, the invasion seemed unstoppable. But humanity had always found a way to defy the odds. It wasn't the first time they had faced overwhelming forces, and it wouldn't be the last. This time, however, the stakes were higher than ever: survival or extinction. In the darkness of night, the snipers moved into position. Their first target was an Igra commander overseeing a key operation in one of Earth's major cities. The clones operated with clockwork precision, but the Igra commanders were the brains behind the assault. Take them out, and the entire system would falter, even if only temporarily. Dalton, lying prone on a hillside miles from the city, peered through her scope. She had visual on the target: a tall, imposing Igra figure surrounded by clone soldiers. The wind was minimal, the shot was clear. All she had to do was pull the trigger. But a sniper's greatest weapon wasn't the gun, it was patience. Timing was everything. She waited, watching the commander as he barked orders at his subordinates. Each second felt like an eternity, but Dalton had made tougher shots under far worse conditions. Finally, the moment came. The commander paused, exposed. With steady hands and a calm breath, Dalton squeezed the trigger. The bullet cut through the air, silent and deadly. It struck the commander square in the chest, sending him crumpling to the ground. Chaos erupted among the Igra soldiers. Without their leader, they hesitated, unsure of their next move. It was a small victory, but one that would sow confusion and slow the invasion's progress in that region. Meanwhile, Sergeant Volkov had infiltrated a nearby cloning facility. Cloaked in shadows, he moved silently, avoiding detection. His mission was to disable the systems responsible for churning out endless waves of cloned soldiers. Every minute the cloning facilities remained operational, the Igra's advantage grew. But Volkov wasn't there to make noise, he was there to break the machine from the inside. As the facility hummed with life, producing row after row of identical soldiers, Volkov carefully set charges at critical points. His expertise in sabotage was unmatched, and he worked methodically, knowing that even the slightest mistake could cost him his life. By the time he was finished, the facility was rigged to implode, rendering it useless for days, if not weeks. Back at the extraction point, Lieutenant Reyes covered their escape, picking off any clone patrols that ventured too close. His speed and accuracy were crucial in these moments, ensuring the team's safe retreat. Every shot was a calculated risk, but Reyes thrived in high-pressure situations. His sharp reflexes and tactical mind made him indispensable. As the team regrouped, the weight of their mission pressed heavily on their shoulders. They had succeeded in their first strike, but the war was far from over. The Igra would respond, and when they did, it wouldn't be with hesitation. The success of their first strike sent ripples through the Igra command structure. The clones, so reliant on their perfect hierarchy, faltered without the guidance of their fallen commander. The chaos was a temporary but crucial advantage for the snipers. Time was now the most valuable resource, and the team moved quickly to capitalize on the confusion. They knew the Igra would adapt, but for the moment, the balance had tipped in humanity's favor. Volkov, operating in the shadows of the ruined city, had already infiltrated a second cloning facility. His expertise in stealth and sabotage was proving invaluable. With every facility he disabled, the Igra's ability to replenish their forces diminished. Each clone that fell could no longer be replaced as quickly. Volkov's methods were precise, disabling key systems without triggering alarms, ensuring the facility remained unaware of the damage until it was too late. While Volkov worked from within, Dalton and Reyes set up positions on the outskirts, covering his exit. Dalton, ever the calm professional, scanned the area through her scope, eyes peeled for any sign of Igra patrols. Reyes, slightly more anxious but equally competent, stayed on the move, adjusting his position every few minutes to keep their flanks secure. Their coordination was seamless, the product of intense training and mutual trust. As Volkov completed his work, a group of Igra clones moved into the area, sweeping the facility for any intruders. Dalton and Reyes watched from a distance, assessing the situation. Volkov, still inside, needed to make his escape without raising alarms. The clones were methodical in their search, and any misstep could trigger a full-scale alert. It was a tense moment, but the team remained calm. This was what they had trained for. Dalton, her breathing steady, tracked the lead clone through her scope. If Volkov couldn't escape undetected, she would need to eliminate the threat without drawing too much attention. Every second counted. Finally, the clone passed through a narrow gap between two buildings, leaving just enough room for Volkov to slip out undetected. He moved swiftly, using the shadows to his advantage, and rejoined the others without a sound. With the second facility neutralized, the team retreated to a safer location to regroup. The mission was going according to plan, but the Igra's next move was unpredictable. The snipers knew that every action they took would provoke a reaction from the enemy. Their advantage was temporary, and they had to stay one step ahead. As the team planned their next strike, the Igra command was already adapting. Word of the sabotage had reached Commander Rival, and he was furious. His confidence in the clone army's superiority had been shaken, and his pride wouldn't allow for any more failures. Rival issued new orders. The clones would no longer simply invade, they would hunt. Within hours, the clones began deploying specialized units, designed not for combat but for tracking. These hunters were engineered with enhanced sensory abilities, capable of detecting heat signatures, tracking subtle environmental changes, and predicting movement patterns. The Igra had realized that brute force wasn't enough to stop humanity's elite snipers. They needed to counter them on their own terms. The team quickly became aware of the change in tactics. Their movements were now being traced, and the once predictable clone soldiers had become far more dangerous. Volkov, in particular, noticed the difference when he narrowly avoided a detection grid set by one of the Igra's hunter units. The team's methods, once so effective, were now being countered. The hunters were closing in. Dalton adjusted the team's strategy. They could no longer rely solely on stealth and sabotage. They had to adapt just as the Igra were adapting. The snipers began using the environment to their advantage, setting traps and creating diversions to confuse the hunters. It became a game of cat and mouse, with both sides constantly shifting tactics to outmaneuver the other. One night, as the team moved through a dense forest on the outskirts of a major Igra base, Reyes spotted a group of hunter units closing in on their position. The hunters were fast, moving with a precision and coordination that mirrored the sniper's own methods. Dalton quickly gave the order to scatter. Each sniper would move independently, regrouping at a prearranged location once they had shaken the hunters. Reyes, always the most agile of the group, darted through the trees, using his speed to stay ahead of the hunters. His instincts kicked in, and he led the clones on a wild chase, creating false trails and leading them into dead ends. Volkov, meanwhile, used his camouflage skills to blend into the environment, staying perfectly still as the hunters passed mere inches from his hiding spot. Dalton, always calm under pressure, moved with purpose, using the terrain to her advantage. She knew the hunters were close, but she also knew their weaknesses. They were designed to track movement, not anticipate strategy. She set up a sniper's nest in a tree, waiting patiently for the right moment. As the hunters passed beneath her, Dalton made her move. A single shot rang out, and the lead hunter fell. The others, disoriented by the sudden attack, hesitated just long enough for Dalton to slip away. It was a small victory, but it bought the team precious time. The group regrouped at their rendezvous point, shaken but still intact. The Igra were getting smarter, and the snipers knew they couldn't keep running forever. The next phase of the mission had to be decisive. They needed to take down a high-ranking Igra officer, someone who could destabilize the entire invasion effort. And they had just the target in mind, Commander Rival himself. The plan was ambitious, but they had no other choice. The longer the invasion dragged on, the more the Igra would adapt. Humanity's only hope was to strike at the heart of the Igra command structure. The team prepared for the final phase of their mission, knowing that success would mean victory for Earth, but failure would mean extinction. The decision to target Commander Rival was a turning point. If they could take him down, the Igra invasion would crumble. Rival wasn't just a leader, he was the mind controlling the invasion. Without him, the clones, who operated under his direct command, would fall into disarray. The team had always known the mission would lead to this moment, but now it was real, and the pressure was immense. Dalton laid out the plan with the precision of someone who had been in high-stakes situations countless times before. They couldn't simply march into the heavily fortified Igra command center and take the shot. Rival would be surrounded by elite bodyguards, far more advanced than the standard clone soldiers. These guards were equipped with shields and reflexes designed to intercept even the quickest of attacks. The snipers would need to lure Rival out into a more vulnerable position, where they could make the shot count. The plan was to hit Rival where it would hurt the most, his ego. The team would create enough chaos around his command center that he would have no choice but to take control in person. They would exploit his arrogance, knowing he saw himself as invincible, and force him to step out of his protected environment. Volkov and Reyes were tasked with setting off a series of explosions at key supply lines around the base. The clones were efficient, but they weren't creative. When faced with an unexpected disruption, they defaulted to protocol, and that's where the snipers would gain their edge. Volkov, with his expertise in sabotage, placed charges with exacting precision, ensuring that each blast would cause maximum confusion without drawing attention to their ultimate goal. Meanwhile, Dalton and the others took up sniper positions far from the chaos, waiting for the right moment to strike. Every movement was deliberate, every action calculated. They knew the timing had to be perfect. One wrong move, and the entire mission would fail. As the explosions rocked the outskirts of the Igra base, just as predicted, Rival's arrogance got the better of him. Furious at the audacity of the human resistance, he stormed out of his command bunker, flanked by his elite guards. The team watched through their scopes as the commander barked orders, directing his forces to deal with the chaos. He was out in the open, just as they had planned. But getting a clear shot on Rival wasn't as simple as it seemed. His bodyguards moved with precision, constantly scanning the environment for any threats. The moment they sensed danger, they would close ranks, protecting him with energy shields that could block even the most powerful sniper rounds. Dalton had one chance to make the shot, and it had to be perfect. As Rival approached a critical point in the supply line, Volkov triggered the final explosion. The ground shook, and debris flew into the air, momentarily disorienting the guards. For a brief second, Rival was exposed, his shield down as he surveyed the damage. This was the window Dalton had been waiting for. Through her scope, Dalton focused on Rival. The distance was extreme, but she had taken longer shots in worse conditions. Her finger hovered over the trigger as she controlled her breathing, calming her body and mind. The world around her seemed to slow as she lined up the shot. She only had a moment before the guards would regroup and shield their leader again. Without hesitation, she pulled the trigger. The bullet flew through the air with deadly precision, cutting through the chaos and finding its mark. Rival staggered, a look of shock crossing his alien features. For a split second, he seemed to grasp the magnitude of what had happened, the realization that he, the commander of the mighty Igra invasion, had been outmaneuvered by mere humans. Then he fell. The moment Rival hit the ground, everything changed. The elite guards, trained to protect their leader at all costs, froze. Without Rival's commands, they were directionless, unsure of how to proceed. The clone soldiers across the base began to falter as well, their programming disrupted by the loss of their commander. Confusion spread like wildfire, and the once unstoppable Igra force crumbled. But the mission wasn't over yet. Dalton and her team knew they couldn't stay in one place for long. The Igra forces were still operational, and without Rival to command them, they would soon devolve into chaos. However, a disorganized enemy was still dangerous, and the team needed to extract before the clones could regroup. Volkov led the team through the outskirts of the base, moving swiftly but cautiously. The Igra guards were still in shock from the sudden loss of their leader, and the snipers took advantage of the disarray to slip away unnoticed. Every step was calculated, every movement deliberate. They had come too far to fail now. As they reached the extraction point, the weight of what they had accomplished began to sink in. They had done the impossible, taken down the leader of an extraterrestrial empire that had threatened to wipe out humanity. But there was no celebration, no time to reflect on their victory. The war wasn't over, and they knew it. There would be more battles ahead, more challenges to face. The team's victory wasn't just in killing Rival, it was in proving that humanity could fight back against overwhelming odds. The Igra had come to Earth expecting an easy conquest, but they had underestimated the resilience and ingenuity of their enemy. The snipers had turned the tide, and though the war was far from won, they had given humanity a fighting chance. As the sun set on the battlefield, Dalton and her team disappeared into the shadows, ready for whatever came next. The world would never know their names, but their actions would be remembered in history as the moment humanity refused to bow to a superior force. They had fought with precision, with intelligence, and with the sheer determination to survive. And in the end, that was what made them truly unstoppable. With Rival dead, the immediate aftermath was chaos. The Igra forces, so dependent on centralized command, were scattered and disoriented. The snipers had done the unthinkable, taken down the head of the invasion. But this wasn't a time for celebration. The death of their leader didn't mean the clones would vanish overnight. The snipers knew that the Igra would regroup eventually, and their elite forces were still operational, even if directionless for the moment. Time was slipping away, and the next move would decide the future of Earth. Dalton quickly assessed the situation. Their mission had been a success, but the Igra were still a formidable threat, even without Rival. The snipers couldn't afford to be complacent. They had to make sure the disarray within the Igra ranks didn't reorganize into something just as dangerous. The clones might be stumbling now, but without a follow-up strike to cripple them, they could recover and continue the invasion under a new leader. The team wasn't done yet. They had one last target: the cloning facilities themselves. These massive structures, buried deep within the Igra strongholds, were responsible for producing the endless waves of soldiers that had overwhelmed humanity's defenses. If they could destroy or disable them, the clone army would be crippled for good. Without reinforcements, the remaining Igra troops would be unable to sustain their invasion. Volkov, who had spent time infiltrating several facilities already, had a clear understanding of their weaknesses. The cloning technology, while advanced, relied on a series of delicate systems that could be disrupted with a few well-placed explosives. Volkov laid out the plan. They would hit the 3 largest cloning centers simultaneously, causing a cascading failure that would render the entire cloning network useless. It was a bold move, but it was the only way to ensure that the Igra couldn't bounce back. As the team made their way toward the first facility, Reyes took the lead, scouting ahead and making sure they weren't followed. Even in the confusion of Rival's death, they couldn't afford to let their guard down. The elite Igra bodyguards were still active, and they were likely searching for the snipers who had assassinated their commander. Each step forward was a gamble, knowing they could be ambushed at any moment. But Reyes, with his sharp reflexes and quick thinking, kept them ahead of any threats. The facility itself was an imposing structure, towering above the ruined landscape. The snipers had prepared for this moment, but seeing the massive scale of the operation up close was a sobering reminder of the stakes. If they failed here, the Igra's ability to produce soldiers would continue unchecked, and Earth's chances of survival would dwindle. Volkov moved swiftly, placing charges at critical points in the facility's infrastructure. His experience with sabotage was invaluable, and within minutes, the explosives were in place. Meanwhile, Dalton positioned herself as lookout, ensuring no patrols or reinforcements would interrupt the mission. Her scope scanned the horizon, ever watchful for any sign of movement. Every second counted, and the tension was palpable. The team's success hinged on perfect timing. If they could take down this facility, the rest would fall like dominoes. As the charges were set, Volkov gave the signal, and the team moved to a safe distance. The facility erupted in a deafening explosion, flames engulfing the structure as it crumbled into ruin. The snipers didn't linger to witness the aftermath. They moved quickly, heading for the next target. This was just the beginning. The second facility was more heavily guarded, the Igra forces beginning to recover from the shock of Rival's assassination. The snipers had expected this. As the invasion continued to unravel, the clones would attempt to regroup and fortify key locations. But the snipers weren't easily deterred. Reyes and Volkov once again took the lead, using diversion tactics to draw the guards away from their posts, while Dalton and the others moved in to plant the explosives. It was a delicate operation, with the team working in perfect synchronization. Every movement was precise, every decision calculated. They knew they wouldn't get a second chance. As the second facility went up in flames, the Igra forces scrambled, unsure of how to respond. Without a leader, they were reacting purely on instinct, unable to mount a coordinated defense. The snipers had them right where they wanted them. The final facility, however, posed the greatest challenge. The Igra elite guards had gathered there, aware that the snipers were targeting their cloning centers. The team knew they were walking into a heavily fortified position, but there was no turning back now. Failure wasn't an option. They approached the facility with caution, using every bit of cover available to them. Reyes once again proved invaluable, leading the team through a maze of debris and ruins, avoiding detection. But as they neared the facility, the Igra guards spotted them. The ensuing firefight was brutal, with the snipers outnumbered and outgunned. Dalton kept her team focused, giving orders with the same calm precision she had displayed throughout the mission. Volkov and Reyes worked together, taking out guards with pinpoint accuracy, while the others moved in to plant the final set of charges. It was a race against time, with the Igra forces closing in fast. Dalton knew they had only minutes to get the job done. The team moved with incredible speed, each member fulfilling their role flawlessly. As the final charges were placed, they made a hasty retreat, firing off shots to keep the Igra at bay. The explosion that followed was the largest yet, sending shockwaves through the ground and obliterating the cloning facility in a massive fireball. The Igra forces, already crippled by the loss of their leader, were now without reinforcements. The snipers had succeeded. The clone army, once endless and overwhelming, was now nothing more than a scattered, directionless force. As the team regrouped, the weight of their victory began to sink in. They had accomplished the impossible. Rival was dead, the cloning facilities were destroyed, and the Igra invasion was in shambles. Humanity had been given a fighting chance, thanks to the courage and skill of a few elite snipers. But there was no time to rest. The war was far from over, and the Igra were still a dangerous enemy, even in their weakened state. Dalton and her team knew they would continue the fight, wherever it led them. For now, though, they had done what no one thought possible. They had turned the tide of an alien invasion and saved Earth from certain destruction. In the end, it wasn't superior numbers or advanced technology that won the day. It was human determination, strategy, and the ability to adapt that gave them the edge. The snipers had outsmarted a seemingly unbeatable enemy, proving once again that humanity was a force to be reckoned with.